My sister's engagement party was the kind of event my mother had been planning since roughly the moment my sister was born. 3 weeks of coordination, a rented venue hall in Oakville, custom floral arrangements with peonies and eucalyptus, a caterer from Burlington who apparently had a 6-month wait list. My mother had sent a color-coded itinerary to the family group chat. There were assigned seats, there was a dress code, there was a slideshow. I arrived exactly on time, which in my family meant I was somehow already late. "There she is," my brother said when I walked through the door, and he said it the way you'd announce the arrival of someone you'd forgotten to include on a guest list but felt obligated to accommodate anyway. Not cruel. Just absent, like I was a footnote that had shown up in person. My mother kissed my cheek. "You look tired. Are you sleeping?" "I'm fine. You always say that." She was already turning back toward the caterer before the sentence finished. I found my seat near the back of the room, next to my aunt's husband, a man named Gary, who spent most of the evening telling me about a documentary he'd watched about the Yukon. I wasn't unfamiliar with the back of the room. I'd been sitting there in various configurations my entire life. "I'm Petra Voss. I'm 31 years old, and I work in software infrastructure, which, in my family, roughly translates to, she does something with computers that nobody quite understands, and we've stopped asking." My sister Blythe was 27 and glowing, in a way that seemed physically impossible for someone who had spent the previous 3 days texting the group chat about Centerpiece Heights. Her fiancé Reese was the kind of man my parents approved of immediately and loudly. 6-foot-something, worked in commercial real estate development in Toronto. Firm handshake, easy laugh. Within 10 minutes of meeting him 18 months ago, my father had clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Finally, someone who speaks my language." My father, Warren, had built a mid-size property development company out of nothing. He'd started it in his late 20s with a partner, bought him out by 40, and turned it into one of the better-known residential and mixed-use developers in the greater Golden Horseshoe. He talked about it the way some men talk about their children, with the specific pride of someone who has created something from raw material and watched it grow. We were, as a family, proud of him. He had every right to that pride. He was also very good at reminding us of it. Dinner service started at 7. By 7:30, my father had steered the conversation, as he always did, toward business. "We've finalized the Lakeshore North project," he said, setting his fork down in a way that meant he expected the table to pay attention. "Groundbreaking is set for April. Mixed-use residential, 12 stories, right on the waterfront corridor. Biggest single contract we've signed." Rise leaned forward. "What are we talking, value-wise?" "28 million. The table responded the way my father liked. Raised glasses, impressed sounds, my mother pressing her hand over her heart like she might actually cry from the magnitude of it. My brother nodded with the gravity of someone being briefed on national security. Blythe squeezed Riss's arm proudly, as if the deal were somehow a credit to her. I picked up my water glass. "The timing is tight," my father continued. "We've got a window between contract execution and the first municipal disbursement, where we need to cover bridge financing. About 6 weeks of exposure. The number's manageable. Around 350,000. We've got a private lender group we've worked with before. It should be straightforward." I set my glass down. "I can cover that," I said. The table went quiet. It wasn't the kind of quiet that means people are genuinely considering something. It was the kind that follows a statement that doesn't quite compute. A brief, social recalibration, like someone has said something politely absurd. My brother recovered first. He laughed. Not meanly, but in the way you laugh when a child says something unexpectedly earnest. "Petra, I'm serious. 350 is within what I can move quickly. I know how bridge financing works." My father's expression shifted into something careful. Patient in a way that felt like management. "Sweetheart, this isn't personal lending. We're talking commercial real estate bridge structures. There's legal scaffolding involved. Escrow arrangements, a whole framework. I understand the framework." "In theory," my brother said, reaching for the breadbasket. "But this isn't tech. It's a different world." I didn't say it wasn't. Fries, who I think genuinely meant well, jumped in with the tone of someone trying to land a plane smoothly. "I don't think anyone's doubting you. It's just, 350 is real money. Not exactly something you just have sitting around." Blythe put her hand over mine across the table. "It's a lovely offer, truly, but you'd be in over your head with the structure of this. No offense." I looked at my father. He looked at his plate. "None taken," I said. I reached into my bag, took out my phone, and sent a message to my financial advisor. Her name is Kezia Olawale. She's been managing my accounts and investment positions for 5 years, and she answers messages at 11 p.m. on weeknights like it's part of her resting state. The message was 8 words. "Begin a full review of Voss development, tonight." I put my phone face down. Dinner continued. My father talked about the Lakeshore North project in detail. Phase timelines, municipal approvals, the heritage designation complications on the adjacent parcel. My brother talked about managing the subcontractor relationships. Rise, who apparently had a professional opinion on everything, weighed in on the waterfront corridor's development trajectory. Blythe talked about the company's rebrand, a project my parents had brought her in to lead. They passed the roasted vegetables and laughed about something that had happened at a sidewalk, and they were, genuinely, a warm family in that moment. I was there. I participated. I answered when spoken to. I laughed at the right moments, but there's a specific way you can be at a table, and not be at it. I had been practicing that skill since childhood. At some point, my father mentioned their financing partners, a private equity group called Harlow Ridge Capital. He described them in the tone he reserved for things he trusted deeply but didn't quite understand. They're not a flashy firm, he said. No advertising, no big public profile, but they've been consistent every single time. 3 projects now, never missed a commitment. My phone vibrated on the table. I turned it over. One message from Kezia. Found it. Your holding structure appears in their capital stack across all 3 projects. Ownership interest ranges from 19% to 44%. They don't know. I turned the phone back over. Sounds like a reliable group, I said. The best, my father said. Some people just know how to build relationships that last. He didn't look at me when he said it. My father stepped away from the table at 9:14 to take a call. I noticed because I noticed when he left. I've always tracked the movements of people who hold the energy of a room. He was gone for 4 minutes. When he came back, he looked like a man who had just been handed news he didn't have a category for yet. Harlow Ridge, he said, sitting down slowly. He put his phone on the table with the careful precision of someone who is trying very hard to stay composed. They've called a capital restructuring. They've suspended their position on Lakeshore North. The room did something strange. Not loud. Everyone went quieter. What does suspended mean? Blythe asked. It means their funds aren't available. It means the bridge financing doesn't exist right now. My father rubbed the back of his neck. We had a commitment letter. Signed. My brother was already picking up his phone. I'm calling Marcus. Call the bank before you call the lawyer, Reese said. I'm calling both. The engagement party collapsed, not dramatically but functionally. The centerpieces were still beautiful. The caterer was still serving dessert. But the table had reorganized itself into something else. A crisis meeting in formal wear. My mother looked at me. I don't know what she was expecting. Do you know anything about this? She asked, not suspiciously. Genuinely. The way you might ask someone in a room full of strangers if they know where the exits are. A little, I said. My father looked up. Harlow Ridge runs a private capital structure, I said. They're not widely known, but they're well capitalized. Real estate focused, primarily Ontario and British Columbia, some Alberta exposure. Total assets somewhere around $580 million. How do you know that? My brother asked. Research. Nobody researches a private equity firm that carefully without a specific reason. His eyes narrowed slightly. What's your reason, Petra? I looked at my father. Check your email, I said. I just sent you something. He picked up his phone. Read it once. Read it again. His hand lowered very slowly to the table, and he looked at me in a way I hadn't seen before. Not disappointed, not proud, not the warm but distant look he'd settled into with me over the years. Something more fundamental than any of those. Like a load-bearing wall had moved. Read it out loud, I said quietly. His voice came out low. Harlow Ridge Capital, Principal Ownership Summary. Controlling interest, 81%. Primary stakeholder. He stopped. He actually stopped, like the sentence had stalled in his throat. I'll finish it, I said. Primary stakeholder, Petra A. Voss. Total assets under management, $587 million. Nobody said anything. Reese made a sound that wasn't a word. Blythe put both hands flat on the tablecloth, like she needed the surface to be real. My brother stared at me with an expression I had never once seen on his face in 31 years of being his sister. You're Harlow Ridge, my father said. I have been for 3 years and 4 months. He set the phone down on the table. Petra, how? I folded my hands. This was the part I had thought about for a long time. Not in anger. Anger would have been easier, actually. Anger has momentum, has somewhere to go. What I'd been sitting with was quieter than anger, more like weight. When I left Oakville at 23, I said, I had about $14,000, a laptop, and a piece of software I'd built in my apartment in Waterloo that I thought might be useful to enterprise logistics companies. I was right. I sold a licensing agreement 19 months later for a little under $2 million. I didn't spend it. I didn't know how to spend money that large. So I invested it badly at first, then less badly, then strategically. I made a lot of mistakes. I made better decisions. I kept going. I looked at my father. I learned from you, Dad. Not directly, because you never actually sat down and taught me anything about development or capital or risk assessment. But I was always paying attention. I watched how you thought about land value, about timing, about what makes a project worth the exposure. You'd talk about deals at dinner like I wasn't there, and I absorbed everything. $580 million, Blythe said faintly. And 87, I said. Yes. You invested it in us? My brother's voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. Not anger exactly, but something recalibrating. In Dad's company? I invested in sound projects with a developer whose track record I trusted, and whose asset management I had first-hand familiarity with. The fact that the developer was our father was relevant, but it wasn't sentiment. Every dollar I put into Voss development was a calculated decision based on projected returns and project fundamentals. I paused. You're good at what you do. All of you. I never had any doubt about that. Then why pull the funding? Reese asked. He said it carefully, like he wasn't sure if he had standing to ask. Why tonight? I looked at him for a moment, then at my brother, then at Blythe. Because tonight, when I offered $350,000 to help close a financing gap, which, relative to my actual position, is roughly equivalent to someone offering you a $20 bill for a tank of gas. Everyone laughed. Dad told me I understood it in theory. My brother reminded me this isn't tech. Blythe said I'd be in over my head. I kept my voice level. I've been quietly keeping this company, capitalized through the tail end of the interest rate crisis and a construction cost spike that hit every project in Southern Ontario. I've been your most reliable financial partner for over 3 years. And tonight, at this table, at my sister's engagement party, I was still the one who does something with computers that nobody quite understands. The peonies in the centerpiece were still perfectly arranged. Someone, somewhere near the back of the venue, laughed at something unrelated. My father put his face in his hands. I want to be clear about something, I said. This isn't revenge. I need you to believe that, because it's true. I am not doing this because I want to watch you scramble. I'm doing it because something needed to shift, and I had been trying in small, quiet ways for years. You weren't looking. My father raised his face. His eyes were red at the edges. Warren Voss, who I'd watched build a company with his hands and his nerve and his absolute certainty about his own judgment. He looked like a man who had just discovered that the foundation he thought was bedrock had been poured by someone he'd overlooked. Petra, he said. The word came out stripped of everything he usually had around it. Tell me what you're sorry for, I said, specifically, because it matters. He was quiet for a moment. For not seeing you, he said. For deciding what you were capable of before you'd had a chance to show me. For talking about work, every single week of your childhood like you weren't in the room, and then assuming, when you grew up and actually applied everything you'd heard, that you'd somehow gotten it wrong. His voice caught on something. That's on me. That is entirely on me. My brother spoke without waiting to be prompted. I've been condescending to you, for years. Not with bad intentions, which honestly might be worse. Because I didn't even notice I was doing it. He was looking at the table. I'm sorry, Petra. Rise, who technically had no role in this and probably wished he were somewhere else entirely, said quietly. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for the thing I said about the 350. That was dismissive. Blythe didn't say anything for a long moment. She turned my hand over on the table and held it, the way she used to when we were kids, and one of us had done something bad, and the other one was just sitting nearby absorbing the aftermath. You built something extraordinary, she said finally, and we made you feel like you had to keep it invisible just to avoid making us uncomfortable. That's not what a family does. We have a lot of work to do. I looked around the table. Here's what I want, I said. I'll restore the Harlow Ridge position, full capital reinstatement. The Lakeshore North project proceeds on the original timeline, but I'm not staying off the org chart. I want a formal seat in the business, not as a silent equity partner, as a named stakeholder with actual standing in decisions. I want to be part of conversations that concern my money and my family's company. I want the same weight in a room that Reese gets for having done a few comparable deals in the last 2 years. I let that sit, and I want this family to stop deciding what I am before I've had a chance to speak. My father stood up. He walked around the table and stopped in front of me. He looked older than I'd seen him look in a long time. You have never been invisible to me, he said. I just made you feel like you were. That's different, and it's worse, and I understand if it takes time. He extended his hand, but I'd like to start. I looked at his hand, I shook it. Then I picked up my phone and called Kezia. Restore the full Harlow Ridge position, I said. Lakeshore North complete capitalization, standard draw schedule, and add a supplementary line of $12 million for the Phase 2 expansion. I've had it modeled for 6 months, it pencils out. I paused. Yes, I know what time it is. Merry Christmas. I hung up. I looked at my family. The funds will be confirmed by Monday morning, I said. Lakeshore North is a good project. I would have backed it regardless of tonight. I just needed the tonight to happen. My father laughed, a real one, the kind that surprised him. You would have backed it anyway? You built something worth backing, I said. I just needed you to know who was doing it. Later, after the dessert plates had been cleared and the formal part of the evening had dissolved into smaller, quieter conversations, my mother found me standing near the coat room, looking out at the parking lot and the February night. and the flat gray sky over Oakville. She didn't say anything right away. She just stood next to me, and after a moment, she took my coat off the rack and put it around my shoulders without asking if I was cold. "I've always known you were doing something important," she said. "I just didn't know how to ask about it in a way that didn't come out as worry." "It always came out as worry," I said. "I know, I'm sorry." She was quiet. "I think I was afraid that if I asked too many questions, you'd think I didn't believe in you. And then I never asked, and somehow that communicated the same thing." "It did," I said. "But I understand why." She leaned her head briefly against mine. "I'm going to do better. I know you are." The parking lot was half empty. A light dusting of snow had settled on the cars while we were inside. That particular Ontario February snow that isn't quite committing. Blythe and Reese were near the entrance saying goodbyes to guests, and my brother was standing with my father, heads together, talking the way they talked when something real was happening. $587 million. And a seat at the table I'd been sitting near my entire life without actually being let in. I had built the whole thing. In the years no one was looking. It turned out I'd just been waiting for them to look up.